There's no doubt that this was a massive project and undertaking by not only the clubs but by Harness Racing New Zealand. I think I was talking to one of our team here who said that it's probably the biggest transformation proposal being considered by Rita for the industry for 34 years, and so that was reflected in the submissions. So I think we had just under 30 submissions from clubs, another maybe half a dozen from other interested bodies and individuals, and that represented just under 400 pages worth of information that we needed to work our way through. So it was a big undertaking. There was a plethora of information, but that's reflective of the proposal that went out for consultation in the first place. So that process is now, so the clubs and venues had to have their submissions in by the 15th of June, which they've done. Then HRNZ had to have our submission in relation to that yesterday on the 22nd, which we have now done.
So the submission process, you've done your submission to Rita. Does that give any hope to clubs who didn't have dates for next season? Have you changed your thinking at all?
Well, I think the board took first of all, their charge of taking an industry-wide view, and we've done that. And there were some pretty robust conversations and review of a lot of those submissions. But ultimately, it's Rita's process, and Rita will make the final recommendation on the calendar once they've reviewed all the submissions. So until that has done, I probably can't comment, because I don't want to say one thing that may turn out to be not the case once Rita have made those deliberations. So it's their process. They're the ones that are going to make the final decision.
I guess clubs out there are going to say, though, we've made our submissions, will it make any difference?
Oh, look, definitely there was a lot of consideration from those submissions, would be how I'd say it. We had a long process in terms of review and conversation. So this was not a rubber stamping exercise.
In terms of the timetable now, where does it sit? How long are you expecting before the final decisions will be made on next season?
Well, it's our understanding that obviously Rita have got to work through our process, and so if there were 300 odd pages from our clubs and venues and our particular submission, you can imagine there'll be a similar number from thoroughbreds and greyhounds, well, less so greyhounds, just given the scale. But it's our understanding there'll be a couple of weeks, and then they will then advise everybody what the calendar looks like, and I suspect they'll probably come back to us first. Historically, this has been a relatively straightforward process, because it's been essentially movement of dates around the calendar, and it's been relatively less complicated than this one. So I suspect they'll probably take a little bit more time. But when we know definitively, we'll obviously, everyone will know.
In terms of dates and venues is one thing, stakes is another, and that's the other burning issue, isn't it? Are they related, and when would you expect to have some sort of final decisions on what stakes are going to look like for next year? Well,
they are kind of related, and the biggest issue we have in terms of stakes is that we don't know what our code funding is going to look like for the next season, and that's the catalyst to inform everything else. So because the codes have still got to come to an agreement on what or how we're going to divide or allocate the bulk funding that will come from Rita, that's making it incredibly difficult for anyone to advise consequently what the level of stakes are going to be. And the other compounding problem is that we don't know, and Rita don't know yet, what that level of overall funding is going to look like. We've had some broad conversations with them, and I guess it's fair to say that it's going to be significantly less. It could be anywhere up to 25% less in terms of code funding, and obviously there'll be a flow-on effect through all of the infrastructure around that in terms of stake levels and how we allocate that level of funding. So I know people want to know. I just can't tell you, because we don't know the answer to the bigger question.
And when would you expect that to be?
Well, we've started those conversations. We had a code meeting last week, and we've got a couple more conversations to have this week. Rita are meeting. I've got a board meeting tomorrow. We were really hoping that we might be able to provide some guidance to them from a code perspective of how we might actually, what sort of model we might be able to use as an agreement between the three of us to inform that discussion. Rita are then presenting their budget to the codes on Friday morning, so we'll all be meeting with them to understand that. So we might know within the next 4 or 5 days.